Welcome to BIB Today, the podcast from the Newsroom of Business in Vancouver. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and executive editor. We spent a lot of time in the last 3 years on this podcast examining the change in the work dynamic amid the pandemic. One of the major changes has been how we raise greater awareness of and address mental health challenges in the workplace, how these once low priorities are now taking center stage. A recent Deloitte study pointed to the need to reconsider the nature of work in this context. My guest today is an occupational therapist turned corporate consultant. Genevieve Hawkins has written a book for business leaders on navigating the many issues today that are going to prove permanent when we at last examine the changes brought on us by the pandemic. The book is called Mentally at Work, Optimizing Health and Business Performance Through Connection. Genevieve joins me from Australia today. Good to see you.
Hey, Kurt, good to see you too.
What made you turn to getting into a book like this at a time like this in your career?
Well, it's interesting actually because I wrote the book pre-COVID, but actually published it as COVID was happening in the first year of COVID. And I think for me, I was sitting back looking at what I was seeing in organisations and seeing that organisations were not thinking about their roles systemically in influencing what's going on for mental health for people in the workplace. And that when we talked about mental health, we'd have conversations that seemed to be far more medical in conversation or very much about the individual.
Right.
And which is really important to have a look at that part. But I just felt that there was a missing piece to go. We talk about mental health over here in a medical model that sometimes isn't accessible. We talk about leadership over here, but a bit detached. And no one's also talking about this concept of systemic work design in terms of the impact on mental health. And so I wanted to bridge a gap, wanted to fill that gap.
You know, we pushed mental health well aside, though, at the beginning of the pandemic. As you remember, I mean, we were preoccupied with the threat of our medical health, our physical health in all of this. Why do you think it eventually became something we took issue with?
I think, so if I go back to the basics of how we're wired as human beings, we are fundamentally wired for connection. And the way I've explained is thinking about, we have a thinking brain and an animal brain. And that animal brain recognizes safety in numbers. It knows that connection is, we are safer when we're in our tribe, so to speak, and closer to people. And so what was happening to begin with was there was an immediate fear, absolutely, from a physical health perspective, because the statistics were rather scary in terms of what the death rates were or significant health problems for people. That actually in and of itself. So in fact, I jump back slightly to go, our brain's also wired for pattern. It looks for pattern, it looks for certainty. And so it was looking for certainty in a world in which it wasn't there. Now, to begin with, we were focused on our medical health, but that fear of what was happening to us and what the risk could be, and then you couple that with, and again, different countries experience this differently, but the lockdowns that were happening, the isolation because of COVID, then actually increase people's levels of anxiety in particular. You then couple that with actually what disrupted in the workplace, so people losing jobs, etc. as well. So the increased levels of depression and anxiety, I think, took a bit of time for people to realise were coming through. And I certainly know in Australia, well, in Melbourne, we were, I don't know whether we still are, but we were the most locked down city during COVID. That there was an increasing call out from people to go, we get physical health, but the isolation that you've put us under is actually causing more problems for us, and we think we need to actually address that.
Yeah, I mean, the absolute uncertainty at the beginning of how many people were going to get COVID-19 and then what it would really entail. We didn't know how fatal it would be. We didn't know how long-lasting some of it would be. We didn't know about anything. We hadn't used the term long COVID before, as we do today in some cases. I want to get a picture from you about how you think, though, that this quandary of dealing with COVID at the beginning and in the first couple of years accentuated a lot of the mental health challenges that had already been there in the workplace, but perhaps had been somewhat suppressed or tamped down by the dynamic of coming to work every day and seeing people and connecting with them.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think that you talk about, I feel like we're going through a bit of in fact, a revolution, not just evolution. I think it's a revolution in how we think about work. And I welcome the Deloitte study because it certainly lines up with the views of what I had put into the book as well. But I think pre that COVID world, it was more comfortable for people to be able to go, you're there. We don't really need to know about you as a person and what your life is. I pay you to do a job. Can you come in and do that job for me?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, that's really harsh because some organisations were going, we get this concept called culture, well, some do, not everyone did, kind of get, we've got to belong a bit, but please don't bring too much of yourself to work. Like there was that discomfort, I think, for many to go, I just pay you for that work. And it was more convenient, I think, for managers to go, that's what it's all about. And I don't have to think about how I impact people. And I think even likewise, a concern for many that if you looked at, and across the world, workers' compensation systems look different in different places. But the idea that a workplace would be responsible for people's mental health in any way, shape or form, I think made a whole lot of people uncomfortable because they're going, well, that's you over there and you're responsible for that. And I think COVID actually brought it to the fore because there were so many more people that were anxious, so many more people that were depressed because of the impact. So instead of mental ill health being something that was, we just whisper about it because it's a few people, all of a sudden it was in our faces that this is actually, we're all vulnerable and all of us to varying levels were experiencing challenges in that time. And you couple that with, for people that were working in offices anyway, your home was, you couldn't help but have your home in there. You'd have your cat walk across your screen. You'd have the kids screaming in the background or whatever might be going on helped people, I think, to start open up to a different conversation.
Yeah. Are we able yet to really comprehend how these revelations of our collective mental health have reshaped work?
Great question. Because I think we're still in the process of grappling with that. So I think, and I look at, so when I wrote the book, I was sitting there going, we need to talk about this. We need to talk about a work that looks differently. And when the Deloitte study came out, which is that I've fully aligned with in talking about what does it mean in terms of us as leaders, what does it mean in terms of designs of work, what does it mean in terms of the way we work. Those things are important. Now, I'd go, an organisation like Deloitte put that out there because organisations are still grappling with it. And we need that thought leadership to come out there to help organisations reimagine what it means to be meaningful in this workplace. So I think what I expect to see, already starting to see and expect to continue to see grow, is that you'll always have the organisations that get it early on and reimagine work fairly quickly. But you'll actually have a whole lot of people voting with their feet. And so people, talk about the great resignation and that whole point of going, I'm searching for a place where I have meaning and where I belong. And so if you as an organisation can't give that to me, then I'm going to move myself. And so actually it's kind of a groundswell change that I think will fundamentally shift workplaces across the globe.
Yeah. Are you worried? Are you seeing evidence, though, of businesses saying, okay, we have kind of gotten through this. We don't need to apply this attention to mental health. We can kind of go back to where we were at the beginning of 2020.
Yes, that's wishful thinking, isn't it? But yes, absolutely. I'm saying, and again, I think it depends on how much people have a capacity to think deeply and systemically about their organisation. But absolutely, I mean, I had some, in fact, I can't remember who it was that said to me recently, well, we've moved on from that now. We've got bigger problems to solve than mental health. And I'm sitting there going, you do that at your peril. Because, yes, there are some, I think when people not even necessarily gone back, but people are sitting there going, world economics are really unstable, we're really uncertain, we've got climate change, we've got, all sorts of tensions within the globe. Can we just not worry about that? Because we really want to get onto, we want to make some money and we want to try and have our organisation work. But I would say it's at their peril that they ignore it. But absolutely, I'm seeing signs of that. And people go, we can move on.
There's another side of the worry, and it's that obviously before the pandemic, it's not as if everybody wanted to come to work every day, right? In a lot of cases, the office or the factory was, you had to get out of your shell every day. You had to come in, you had to participate, you had to collaborate, you had to create, do all those types of things. The pandemic, in a way, provided you an opportunity to go back in your hidey hole. And for, I think, some people, they haven't come back out of it. And that is kind of a different kind of worry. How serious is that, do you think, that now people can burrow themselves back in, work remotely, and kind of dodge the difficulty of for their mental health?
I think so. I remember reading some research, and this was before COVID came along, and not even imagining it that this would force it because of COVID, but actually talking about the way technology was heading and saying the way that technology was heading, we could literally end up being, we don't need to move anywhere. We don't need to move out of our house, and sometimes not even off our couch, because we can get people to deliver food. We can get people to entertain us on a screen. We can do our work from home. We don't need any of that. So it's in the context of that isolation piece, I think that there is, I think there's a couple of things for me. One is that I think there will end up being some design of work that says you're not coming in at all, you're not quite connected. Now, my argument with that from an organisational point of view is saying if you do that and you have complete remote people, then you may not get the best from them because they may not feel a sense of connection to the work that they are doing there. Now, if that's okay for you because it's a transactional thing and you don't care as an organisation, you go, that's fine, you can stay home, then on the one hand, from a work perspective, they can go, well, I don't have a problem. I've got a whole lot of people doing that. I think at an individual level, what's really, really important is for this education around understanding how important it is to belong, and that if work isn't what gives you that, you need to find that sense of belonging with other people. That's what's really, really important.
Yeah. Because it obviously provides us with, many of us, with a big part of our identity. And certainly the sense of purpose, fulfillment, accomplishment. Those are egoic things in many ways, but they are qualities of it. Again, how worried are you about the fact that particularly the younger part of the workforce, which maybe hasn't ridden this out as okay, well, it's a couple of years out of what has been a 3-decade career or something. If it's 3 years out of a 6 or 7 year career, what kind of distortion do you think this is providing us with, this connection?
Connection and learning and being better. I think actually I am in some ways worried about we won't see some of the impacts for another few years, because of the realities of saying if you're young in your career and you were used to going, I mean, we often didn't appreciate how much people learned by osmosis, how much people felt they belonged because they're just in there, and you've got the buzz of going to the kitchen and everyone's, grabbing themselves a coffee, or you're sitting at your desk and someone hears a conversation that you're having and turns around and says, hey, are you okay? Or let's have a chat about that. Or you're just asking questions that we learn so much about how we not only learn ourselves, but how then as we get wiser, how we support the next generation. And I think that's part of the gap with it as well, is that you've got these people who've been isolated, have not got as much learning, so they're not feeling as connected to that, and they won't have as great a capacity then to teach others. So I think that is a real challenge. And I think, as we evolve from a work perspective, more and more of the work that we're saying you could do from home in terms of the automated processing things, actually technology will take those jobs over. What technology can't take over is human connection. And so we need to, organisations need to find ways of creating a way in which people want to come back into the office. And I'm not saying all the time, because I actually think there's an incredible benefit of hybrid work. But for young people, that sense of belonging and learning and nurturing to be better professionals in whatever work that they're doing is really, really important.
And yet I see businesses struggling with how it is that they're bringing people back. I mean, they're pretty well loading on incentives that feel to me, not really authentic. They're they're kind of tricks in a certain way to get people back in a building for a little bit, to see if it then tantalizes them sufficiently to stay for a full day, come back next week for a few days. How do you think businesses can do that better, to do something that is going to appeal authentically to the core of somebody, to then make them feel correctly about it and not feeling like they're being incentivized?
Yeah, told what to. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think I'm not against the incentive to begin with, and I think about it from a personal perspective because we were locked down as much as we were. We got so used to doing work from home that when it was first go back to the office, for me, even I've got to remember my shoes, and I've got to remember my lunch, and then I come in and there's not many people around. Then I kind of go, why have I come in if not many others are around? So I think to begin with, the first one is actually, as a leader, you need to start that habit yourself. And you need to persevere with that a bit, so that you get outside your own comfort zone and go, how do you come in and get used to it and talk about the discomfort? And that's certainly what I did with my team. I was sitting there going, this is strange, isn't it? This is hard. I find this difficult, but here's what I'm then gaining when I'm coming back and what I'm learning. So a bit of share the vulnerability of, it's not like, click your fingers and off we go. It's okay. And share the stories of how you can flex a little bit in how things work. The other so I think organisations saying leadership, set the example. The other thing from a business point of view for me is going, how do you make sure, you create meaning in what work is all about, why it is that you want to be part of this organisation in the first place. What is the big, hairy, ugly problem that you're trying to solve, that you all love that you're solving? And then how do you create that there's certain things that you want people to come in for, where everyone goes, actually, I do want to be part of that, because we would just want to have a couple of hours in a room with whiteboards and markers to be able to brainstorm some things. And while we're doing that, let's have a bit of a laugh, etc. My experience is, certainly in my current role, is that is now what's happening to grow and build that trend. So early on, it was hard. We resisted forcing people to go, you must come back. But it wasn't necessarily incentives that were saying, here you go. Actually, no, I think there were some, but didn't pay attention, because it was like, we'll give you cheap coffee, or we'll give you free coffee in this, section, or we'll do this or that. It wasn't about that. It was, for me, about the connection rituals. So these rituals of connection are so, so important. And when people start to see that, there starts to be and you can hear it from people, you go, oh, this is really nice. And if we can coordinate, so can we all come in on the same day? Can we not kind of come in and there's just 3 people, but let's have a day that we all agree that's there. And the other thing I'd say to businesses is, and particularly depending on size, but even if you're really big, within your teams you can do this, have conversations with individuals, understand what's going on for them, and how you find that sense of connecting into the meaning of the work, rather than cheap incentives or demanding.
Yeah. Do you think we're done with the 5-day work week for white collar work? 5-day office work week?
I think we are. I do think we are.
Yeah.
I think, which is hard, I think, for organisations in some ways to grapple with. But I think my sense of what COVID has accelerated for people is going, what are we doing on this planet? And why do I want to slave away, if you like, the whole time? Why can't I have some flex so I can feel like I can create a whole life that works for me? And I think that organisations need to flex around that. Now, you still might find, I said over time, I'm finding it building, and I will have people in my teams that will come in 5 days a week because they go, I don't want to be at home. I've got noisy kids, or I've only got a bedroom and I haven't got to study, or various different things. People, it's much better and it's closer. But then absolutely there are others saying, do you know what, actually my commute to work was an hour and a half one way. And if I can save that time, then that's great. And actually if I can then be there to drop my kids off to school, then that's great. So I think the 5 days in the office has changed. I think the challenge for businesses and for individuals is when we flex into this different world, we can't then have work take over an entire 7 days a week. So that's the challenge. You've got to still help people to find boundaries in the choices that we make there.
Yeah, it feels in some ways like what we're experiencing is a kind of retrieval of that time that over the last generation, particularly as technology has come along to permit us to stay in touch 24/7, it feels like at times, that there's a bit of a retrieval going on in all of this. And I wonder if you've yet thought through what maybe will be the ultimate reverberation of this, the end of it, where where we kind of settled in and then can start to take a look at the dividends of having this work from home, work at the office, rebalance and all of that, and what you think it might confer on work, not just on life, but on work.
Oh, wow, Kirk. That's a deep kind of reflection on it, isn't it? I think the world is continuing to change. So I think, first of all, the world is continuing to be. When we talk about, the VUCA of the world is so volatile and uncertain and complex and ambiguous, that this world is continuing to be like that and will only continue to be like that. And I think